Very excited to have back on the show Blue Jays reporter and insider for MLB.com, Keegan Matheson. Welcome back to the Walk-Off, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Happy to be here, guys. How's everything?
Good, buddy. How's your summer been? Did you get back to Halley since we last chatted?
Not since. I was there over the winter. Last time would have been Christmas. And I think when I landed was the day that they went back to like the 3 or 5 person bubbles.
Right.
And my folks live in the middle of nowhere to start with. So I haven't had my traditional, lower deck party return yet in Halifax. Really. So I would like to get there and support some local businesses, but soon.
Well, you're a little Halifax famous. It's funny because we've got in our Discord, I posted that you were going to be on the show, and we had about half a dozen guys who are from the East Coast that were all hyped up on that. So
that's the only place I give a damn about mattering, let me tell you. this Toronto stuff, I don't know. It's not for me, but no, that's good to hear.
All right, so obviously yesterday was complete mayhem, and let's just get right into it because this is what everyone wants to hear about. And now that a day's gone by and the dust is kind of settled, I think most Jays fans are sort of on the same page, right? The team is better than they were yesterday. They addressed most of their holes, I guess, if you will, in an unsexy way, but they did address it. But it also feels a little bit underwhelming. Is this just perception? Did they actually accomplish what they set out to do? And how do you feel about their moves?
It's fine. It's okay. I'd love to have a hot take because that's what sells, but it's okay. They're better. The moves fit who they are as a team. I expected them to chase more upside, more of a strikeout guy in the bullpen because the scenario I keep coming back to is, 1-1 game, 8th or 9th inning, guy on third base, 1 out. You need a strikeout. Ground ball, you lose. You need a strikeout. Yeah, I got like Adam Simber, fantastic. Tim Mayza, Phelps, Jimmy Garcia through the bullpen there. But a lot of those guys are 8 or 9 strikeout per 9 guys. This bullpen desperately needs that 14K per 9 wipeout guy. And I see what they're doing in that bullpen group. What they're doing is having 6 or 7 David Phelpses, which is a good reliever, an above average, valuable reliever. So now instead of, Trevor Richards or Trent Thornton coming out of the bullpen in the 5th, you've got legit guys lining up who are doing well.
Yeah, they raised the floor for sure.
Yeah, that's what you're getting to. And that will get you to the postseason, sure. But at this point, if you're the Blue Jays, it's not about reaching the postseason. I don't care if they reach the postseason. That's expected. Like, look at this roster. My God, you had better make the postseason with this roster or something has gone terribly wrong. A team of this caliber needs to be concerned with the absolute top. It's World Series or bust. Whether you blow out in the first round or lose in the World Series, whatever, but it needs to be aiming big. And at this point, you're not comparing yourselves to the Mariners or my God, Baltimore. But shout out Baltimore Orioles. You got to respect it. But you've got to compare yourself to the Yankees, to the Dodgers. This is you need to have that big brother thinking, not the little brother thinking, trying to get a seat at the table. So they're a better team. The Mitch White deal, which is exactly the Ross Stripling trade over again, which is good. That's been valuable. And then going out and adding Whit Merrifield, it's raising the floor because you're talking about going from Trent Thornton to Anthony Bass. You're talking about going from maybe a Max Castillo or whichever flavor of the week-long reliever there is. Usually I don't even know. I'll be very honest.
Yeah.
A guy runs out of the bullpen and I think, well, Jeremy Beasley's still here. Great. You raise that, and then with Whit Merrifield, I guess you're upgrading from a Bradley Zim type of thing. Yeah. So somebody else will have to play the last inning of every game for George Springer. But it's not raising the ceiling much. It's not closing the gap. The Yankees are not waking up today and thinking, oh, my God, here come the Blue Jays. But at the same time, and I don't say this just for the sake of balance because I don't care about both sides of things, but look at the Braves when they won their World Series. I also kind of compare this, guys, to what the Raptors did in the NBA for a while before they got Kawhi. They just made the playoffs every year. You keep making it, you keep making it, you keep making it. One of these times your talent will click. Maybe one of these times Manoah throws a couple of dominant games and steals you wins. And, maybe this isn't the year that you get your Kawhi or whoever the guy over the top is going to be. But there is something to be said about just making the playoffs every year for 5 years, and maybe something will happen. But that's not the boldest strategy in the world. I was expecting a little more upside.
So let's talk a little bit about the guys that we did bring in here. Mitch White is an interesting piece, and you touched on him, right? Spot starter, swing guy, comparable to Ross Stripling. Depth piece for sure. What do you know about Mitch White?
The Stripling comp is easy, but it's accurate. It's fitting what the Blue Jays want to do as a team, frankly. And that is to have, your top-end guys with a Berrios, how he's been pitching lately, Manoah, Gossman was brilliant yesterday. Stripling now on the IL. That's unfortunate. Kikuchi, I'm just looking off the side here. Looks like he's just barely hanging on, which is typically how it's going. But I think the Blue Jays, maybe by design, maybe as a very convenient fallback that they're comfortable with, always want to have one or two Ross Striplings. And Mitch White is very much a Ross Stripling. He's not going to blow you away, not going to strike out 12 guys per 9 by any means. But it is a valuable trait to be able to go back and forth like that. And a lot of guys do it, but that's still kind of like the old utility infielder. Like the guy can play 4 positions but hits 210, so who cares?
Yeah.
Some guys can actually do this well now and do it with a level of skill and talent like you're seeing Stripling doing. So I think that Mitch White is going to start games down the stretch. I think he is going to pitch out of the bullpen. But the Blue Jays needed to address starting depth, because if they had not traded for Mitch White, who are we talking about today starting a game? Castillo is gone. You're looking, Thomas Hatch got an opportunity, and Hatch, guys, is a pitcher I like. The Blue Jays like him. He just came up and got tanked in that game.
Yeah, he did.
But the Blue Jays all season, we haven't talked about it much, and I don't think I recognized it properly, but that upper minors AAA depth, just having a guy who can come up and not dominate, who cares, but just a guy who can come up and throw 6 innings of slop, allow 3 or 4 runs, keep you alive. There hasn't really been that. They've
kind of lacked that this year, right?
Yeah.
Like that's been Achilles' heel, if you will.
Definitely. So White can be that, but I think he'll be out of the bullpen quite a bit as well. And I do think something like the Syndergaard would have been a bigger upgrade, more upside. Throw him in the bullpen in October and go wild. Why not? But, Mitch White, again, team control. The Blue Jays cared about team control here quite a bit, which is all about this window they believe they have and that they factually have over the next 4 or 5 years. And White, Zack Pop is another that has some team control. But it's another Stripling, and that's who these Blue Jays are. I think it's maybe not the approach all teams are taking. Most teams seem to have a factory of guys throwing 100. In Toronto, we still get excited when a guy throws 97, but it's a different strategy. Yeah.
Ross Atkins definitely threw a couple curveballs our way that I guess we didn't really see coming, and I think the biggest was Whit Merrifield, who was announced after the deadline. Shocking for most fans because we watched him not cross the border with the Royals just a month ago in that series. Contact hitter, speedy guy. He can play second. He can help Springer out at center field. Like, he does sort of fit that depth role that they were looking for. What is your reaction to Merrifield's acquisition? And any idea? Have you heard anything on the vaccination status? My guess is that they're not planning on him just playing away games.
Yeah. It surprised me. Deadline day, of course. This is an unusual one for me. I was here in Toronto working the deadline instead of being in Tampa. And, of course, have my notifications on for the people who matter, the blue check marks, And just as I was beginning to write I guess this would have been the Mitch White story, got a notification from, I think it was our guy, Mark Feinsand or somebody, but saying, Merrifield has been dealt. To which I looked at and said, cool, whatever. It's not, I don't have to care about this.
Can't be Toronto.
This guy did he did his own research. I don't care. And then to the Blue Jays. Didn't expect that. Won't pretend to sound smart and say I did. Now, It would shock the hell out of me if the Blue Jays traded for a guy with no inclination he'd get vaccinated. I know that Ross Atkins said they just had a chance to say hello, and he'd leave that up to Merrifield and his family. But I don't think the Jays are going to be the high bidder on a guy who is a 50-50 dice roll. That doesn't logically line up. So I'd be shocked if he does not get the vaccination. Strange that it takes the temptation of playoff baseball to, get vaccinated against the novel coronavirus, but that's another thing for another day. But even if he does, it's of all reasons. But if he does get that vaccination, there will be a bit of a window, I guess.
Right.
Even if he does the single shot, I'm not sure those windows, but it's an interesting one because the Blue Jays, we haven't talked about it much just because they've been vaccinated. So it's not a story, right? And this is really the first time where we have talked about it a lot. It's always been about the opponents, about a U.S. team coming in, and I cover the Blue Jays, so whatever. But this is one of the first times where it's really been a factor for the Blue Jays, and I didn't expect it to be whatsoever. But at the same time, when I hear the word Whit Merrifield, and I think a lot of fans will be in the same boat, you think of the all-star Whit Merrifield, 2019, 2021. He's not really doing that this year.
No,
so
he's not.
There's the speed, but if he's a guy that's hitting 250 and OPS and 650, well, that's good. There's some speed. I mean, that's still a significant upgrade from Zimmer, definitely in the late innings.
Yes.
But you want him to get back to that 280 hitter, 700 plus OPS. And he's probably the one guy on this roster. This is kind of an across-the-board athletic roster. Not much in terms of like true number one stolen base guy who you put in when you need one, even if it's obvious. So he's probably that. Ross Atkins called him an everyday player. We'll see. I think he and Biggio and Tapia will just spin the wheel every day, see what happens. But that one was not expected, not at all. And it's that'll be an interesting one when he gets to, I guess, Minneapolis, when I'll see him there tomorrow.
Do you think that we could see his production increase a little bit with being within a lineup that definitely protects a little bit better than, let's say, that Royals lineup did?
Yeah, name another Royals hitter. I don't know. It's tough, It's
so you're like, don't do Sal Perez. Right. That's the easy way out. Yeah.
It's honestly, I would struggle. Having Vladdy or George Springer or the red hot Matt Chapman, whoever the hell it is behind him, is going to be better. Period. It's going to be better. And this is not something we can measure. It's we're getting into the world of vibes here. But going from the Royals to the Blue Jays has to help a guy's head a little bit. The Royals are brutal this year. There is no good energy around that team. Yeah, you've got Bobby Witt up there, but it's not a team that's a year away either. So That's got to be so energizing to go from a place that's pretty hopeless in terms of this season to a place that has extremely high postseason odds where you can be a legitimate contributor. And that's what he's used to being. So it's a fresh start that I think will be very welcome for him. Now he's 33. I forget that he started his career at 27, a late bloomer. But to do that and have a little more protection in the lineup, and I think, guys, he's going to fit with this just out-of-your-mind, hair-on-fire John Schneider style of baseball, which I love, because I don't care who wins and loses. I like a game that's a little chaotic, and the Blue Jays are really chaotic right now. They're running like crazy. Every day, Vladdy is trying to steal a base. If you do that with Whit Merrifield, probably looks a little better. I feel like every time I look at my TV, I'm seeing Lourdes Gurriel Jr. sliding into a base where the guy is standing there waiting with a ball.
Yeah.
But if you have a guy who can really run, like Whit Merrifield, I think that fits the identity a bit more. So across the board here, guys, we're seeing some like identity fits. That's not to say it's going to win a World Series, but it at least fits with what the team's trying to do logically. Yeah.
So let's talk Zack Pop, Canadian boy. Out of Brampton, Ontario, right? He was acquired from the Marlins with Anthony Bass, a guy that most Blue Jays fans already know from 2020. Tell us a little bit about Zack Pop. Is this a little bit of a project? Like, I know he's got term, right? And really, he just started his service time. He literally could be under Jay's control for like 5 years. I know that, again, we talked raising the floor, and obviously he's better than, let's say, an Anthony Banda. Do you foresee him in any high-leverage situations in 2022?
I think he will be the guy that you see coming out maybe in the 5th or 6th inning. That first reliever out of the bullpen. and is not a high strikeout guy, despite the fact he throws, I think, 96.5, the averages. But
Yeah.
he's a massive ground ball guy. I think it's like 63 and some percent ground ball, which, again, in many ways, the Blue Jays, pitching style for the last 10 years, a lot of these guys would be pretty natural fits in like the 80s, but a lot of ground ball guys, a lot of soft contact. But Zack Pop is a modern version of that because there's a velocity to go with this. We're not talking about another like TJ Zoik sinker baller. There's real velocity coming out of this. And some people like his slider too. Doesn't throw it as much. He's heavy sinker in that fastball. But there's obviously something there. And team control, you can work with this guy. This is not a 2-month rental where you are adding like Joaquin Benoit or something, and you're not going to tell a 38-year-old guy what to do. But when you add a guy in his mid-20s with team control, this is a fun project for Pete Walker, for Matt Bushman, for all of those ridiculous computers they hook these guys up to, because Zack Pop has some unique traits, and that's at least something you look for. Anthony Bass in that deal too is having a career year, but Zack Pop, a guy followed as a prospect, then the surgery, of course, but has come back and looked really good and been reliable. You just don't want a guy to light the game on fire in the 5th or 6th, and for now, that's probably where he is, with guys like Jimmy Garcia, Phelps, etc., a little behind him.
He is throwing the hardest out of everyone in this bullpen other than Jordan Romano, so that is impressive.
It's not the most high-powered bullpen in baseball still.
No, it is not. No, it is not. So we touched on this a little bit, and obviously you kind of mentioned, right, the gap between the Yankees and the Blue Jays, and the Yankees and the Astros probably wasn't really closed in this trade deadline. In fact, it felt like maybe it was widened. The Blue Jays definitely took a more tempered approach to the deadline than those two teams did, who already had elite lineups. If the Blue Jays face either of these teams in a playoff series, do they have a chance? And if so, what needs to happen for them to take down one of these teams in a 7-game series?
Yeah, they still easily can. It's even without the trade, they still easily can. It's a good team, but they need to hit. They absolutely need to hit, because we have seen too many times this year where the Blue Jays will go up against a soft-tossing lefty and on random nights just get shut down. They run a little hot and cold. Lately has been a lot more consistent, much hotter, but you need to see where that is come the end of September into October. So I think for the Blue Jays, the trouble of the postseason is that you look at a lot of 3-1, 4-2 games. That's when this bullpen might get exposed, or that is when you are really going to be micromanaging that transition from the starter to the bullpen, how aggressive you can be. That will be their disadvantage probably against one of these super teams. But this lineup is still as good as anybody in baseball. Even though we've been talking about, and by we, I mean me, writing stories about a struggling lineup, then I look and see, well, they're 3rd in runs scored, they're 2nd in OPS. Am I just an asshole? I don't know. But you can still underperform and be good, because their expectations were sky high. And you've seen everybody one by one kind of break out. Way back, it was Alejandro Kirk in May. Then it was Hernandez. Matt Chapman has done that. They're still waiting on Bo Bichette, but Teoscar has had his breakout. I believe he homered in this game here today. But you need Vladdy to come out and be the guy that's hitting 350 with an 1,100 OPS for the playoffs. Like you need absolute superstar performances from this team. And when you roll the dice, because this team is going to roll the dice on the bases, man, you better work, because this team will take some risks. And over the course of these final, 60-some games, if you screw a few up, whatever. You're probably going to get more right than you get wrong. But over 5 or 7 games, that's really magnified. So they need to hit on everything.
Well, it was kind of funny even yesterday to touch on that. I think I watched with Vladdy stretching that single into a double right away in the first inning, and then wound up scoring, and then Lourdes just ran into an out right after that. And I was just like, okay, so it's they scored a run and they lost a run over this. Like, it's like, it's a wash. It comes out even.
Exactly. It does tend to balance itself. We've seen that a few times. Vladdy's probably the biggest culprit. Sometimes it looks great. Sometimes he's tagging up to go to 3rd and you're wondering, what are you doing? So it's probably something they need to practice a little bit more, when to be aggressive, when not to be.
So Keegan, I'm curious your thoughts on Juan Soto. Because honestly, man, even despite the writing being on the wall, despite it being talked about for weeks beforehand that he was going to be moved, it still blows my mind
Oh
that
yeah.
he was actually traded. What kind of a unicorn deal is this actually in baseball history? Can you think of anything comparable even in sport?
No, this is hyper rare. This is incredibly rare. We point back sometimes to that Miguel Cabrera deal, but unless you're a hardcore fan, you don't know who was in that deal now, because no matter how good a package is, and I see all the praise for the package that Washington did get back, but I don't care. Honestly, I really believe in star chasing in MLB. I think as a front office, you need to go out of your mind to get a star whenever you can, and trust that if you deal some guys, well, you can go out and draft or find a guy on waivers or a smaller trade to go in and play second base and fill that plug, whatever, because stars are so rare. And Juan Soto, unless he blows a knee or loses something, like Hall of Famer, this guy is rare talent at his age. And I love it. I think that one thing that baseball needs more is ridiculous trades. That's why the NBA is the model for me, not just due to the personality of the players and how they are tied in and paralleled with culture, but the moves, the trades every offseason. Somebody just says, I hate it here, trade me. And it happens. It's so good. Baseball does not have that, ever. We're talking about team control and arbitration years and yada, yada. It's cool if you're really into baseball, but if you're trying to convince your friend to get into it, they don't care at all. So trades like this are so good for the sport because it's a dice roll, a little bit for, both sides involved. Maybe this turns into the James Shields for Fernando Tatis trade. Something wild happens, but Juan Soto is the best player in baseball, in my opinion. If you want anybody to build your team around, it's Juan Soto. Now you have him next to Machado, next to Tatis. Yeah, you'll miss those prospects eventually, but whatever. I always tell people, go back, pick your favorite team, and Google, Blue Jays 2014 top prospects. Who the hell are those guys?
Yeah.
Half of them you have not heard of in a long, long time. So it's that's why it cracked me up, even the discourse leading up to that. I have some good friends who cover the NBA, and I messaged them and said, man, I understand now when people send you these trade machine, just out of their mind things. I get it now. Because I'd have people say to me, well, I don't think you want to deal this prospect. But yes, you do. I promise you do. I don't care if it's Gabby Moreno and Tiedemann and Aurelvis. You want to trade them for the sure thing every single time. Because we said the same thing a few years ago about, who would it be? Nate Pearson, probably. He was the guy that you would never trade because he was the big guy who threw 100. More often than not, 9 times out of 10, a prospect will disappoint you. Juan Soto will not disappoint you, ever. And as long as they are able to extend him, which, I think you make the deal with that intent, this is one of the biggest trade in MLB history. And the Padres are, I wish they were in a time zone that allowed me to watch them a bit more. I'm not usually staying up for the 1 a.m. ninth inning, but what a team, man. And an aggressive team. That's what you want to see as a fan. I always bring it back to, the more common casual fan. I know that, we get so tied up with advanced stats and roster building and stuff that, 5% of people really care about. But if you're a casual fan of baseball, you want your team to go out and do something wild. You don't care about balancing the rotation needs and bullpen needs and bulk innings, yada, yada, yada. Go out, get Juan Soto, do something crazy, see if it works. But I think it's just fantastic.
I mean, AJ Preller just blows my mind because what the Padres did on top of adding Juan Soto, they added Josh Bell and Brendan Drury, who are having great seasons. They added Josh Hader, which, in my opinion, is like a slam dunk without Juan Soto, is such a great move. So would you say, when you look at this San Diego Padres team, are they now World Series favorites?
I think they have to be. They have to be in that conversation because in baseball especially, you're not, it's not the NBA or, the NFL where we're worrying about a guy learning a scheme or fitting in with the flow of the ball. Who cares? You take turns in baseball. So it's your stack up talent as much as you can. And they have as much as any team in baseball right now. And having Soto up atop that lineup is ridiculous. Their pitching is very good too. They kept most of their current pitching intact. And that Hader move.
I was going to say they added a pretty good closer.
Yeah, like locking up their back end. So this is a team, kind of like we talked about off the top. This is a team that is boldly going for it and saying, we want to win this year. Next year, we probably do too, but we'll handle next year when we get there. This is all about 2022, the next couple of years, and I love it. I think it's fantastic.
So I know we only have you for another 12 minutes here. We do have some listener questions for you, so
Sure.
we're going to flip to that right away. But before we do that, I just want to take a quick turn back to the Blue Jays. And a lot of folks, yourself included, mentioned it off the top, right? Disappointed that a high velo, high swing and miss guy wasn't acquired at the deadline. So my question to you is there anyone in the system that provides that sort of swing and miss from within, other than Pearson and Merriweather? Hopefully they can stay healthy and maybe contribute, but I mean, there's such a question mark there. Is there anyone off the board that maybe Blue Jays fans might see in September?
Yeah, and those guys are such a question mark that I don't think you even consider it really at this point. Yasser Zulueta would be one. The Blue Jays have shortened him up a little bit. He's a guy that can throw 100, big curveball. He knows where it's going a little more often now, which is encouraging. But he is one of their high power arms who they would like to get up. I think you will see Zulueta come up. And another would be Adrian Hernandez. I was having a lot of success in AAA. Has a ridiculous changeup. Is not a guy who's going to throw 98, 100 whatsoever. But his changeup would immediately be one of the best pitches in the Blue Jays bullpen right now.
Wow.
So those are a couple of arms that could come up. Naturally, with prospects, there will be great excitement with them. How often does a young relief prospect come up and nail it right away in a playoff race? It's tough. That's why I think that it needed to be addressed a bit more beforehand, because you can't involve hope at this point. Teams are too good. When you are going up against Aaron Judge or Juan Soto, you can't be hoping something works. But Zulueta, I think, is one that you will see as long as these next few outings go well for him. And that's what this team needs more of, upside. You're starting to see it through the system. And I should say that too. It's as much as you've seen some of the Blue Jays pitching moves not be as modern or high powered as you see across baseball, down through their system now is changing completely. Like, they are targeting upside. They are targeting velocity, strikeouts. Ricky Tiedemann is the ultimate success story. So I should give them credit in that sense. They've changed that approach, and I like that. Try to produce 2 or 3 stars instead of 5 or 6 guys, because you can find guys. They're always available, right? But you can't always develop that superstar. So that's really what they're focusing on now.
Keegan, can you see Zulueta getting the call up straight from Double-A? Or do you think they move him to Buffalo before anything happens here?
I think he completes the whole trip. And moves every stage up. Doesn't need to be for a long time. I guess he started at the very bottom level this year, but mainly just to build him back up from that injury. So he's going to see the entire system this year, I guess. But he is a guy who, because of his age, I know he's missed a lot of time, first with the Tommy John, and then he threw 2 pitches and blew his ACL. So a lot of crap luck involved. But given his age, I believe Zulu is 24 now. Yeah. So that makes it a bit easier. If he was 21 or 22, that's a little tougher. But at his age, you can move him quick.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate having you on the show. We're going to throw to Adam here, and we've got some listener questions, and we'll end on that.
Okay. Sure. So first one comes in from Jen. During the off season, obviously CBA negotiations, expanded playoffs were a point of contention, and the players seemed worried that was going to affect big market spending and stuff like this. The trade deadline yesterday kind of feels like the opposite has happened. Prices have gone up as there are more bidders and less sellers. I guess the question is, have expanded playoffs effectively increased competition? And as a part 2, how will this affect off-season spending?
Yes, I think it has. We saw this when we expanded from 1 to 2 wildcard teams, whether that was 2 years ago or 20, it's all a bit of a blur for me at this point, but you start to see more teams involved. And I like that because it was happening too often where we would be at this point of the season and you kind of know who the wild card teams are.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, one of Boston or New York, probably Tampa, and a couple of teams would run away with it. And there's nothing worse than baseball that doesn't matter, because when the games don't matter and you're playing every night and the games are 3.5 hours, yikes. But I think it is absolutely increasing competition, and a team like the Orioles is a good example, I think. The Orioles have been so impressive this year. This is happening quicker than I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing it by graduating young talent. So it's not just guys on one-year deals. You're talking about Rutschman, some of that infield youth that they have. They are a perfect example of why this matters, because I think they're a team, honestly, that could come in and do something a little wild in the offseason. I know they don't spend a lot of money, but what's their payroll now? $5, so you can spend something. So
Carlos Correa,
like
perhaps?
Maybe. But teams like that in a 2 wild card or way back in a 1 wild card format, we're just killing time at this point of the season. All of a sudden you're involved, and that is going to drive up prices. Now there might be, instead of 15 buyers and 15 sellers, maybe it's 20 and 10 now. So that increases competition, and hopefully, I think I mean this hopefully, but hopefully that allows teams at the bottom to bounce back a little quicker. If there's a lot of competition for your guy, maybe you grab that number 1 prospect, turn it around, because this league is better when teams are rising and falling, and it's not just the same thing every year. It's good to have the evil empire at the top all the time. Always have the Yankees or something like that, but you don't want to see a team like Baltimore just get stuck in the basement for 20 years, because then what's the point, right? But I think the Orioles, oddly, are a good example of all of this. It gets more competitive, and they're a team that now, going into the offseason, they're young, they're cheap. Maybe they can jump out and do something interesting.
Very good. Okay, next one comes from Josh. Says, so how did Keegan go from having his own Jays podcast at Jays Journal to working for MLB.com? Does he have a background in journalism, or did they just really like his takes on Halifax Donaire?
Man, it's been a minute. I should have started a podcast on Donairs. I would, I would do anything just for a Tony's special. I still get that thought too, because the quick aside is that yesterday I got my second booster, and I got just knocked on my ass by the side effects. And the side effects of it feel a lot like a hangover. So I wish that was the case. I wish I'd had more fun last night. But whenever I've got that kind of, a little sweaty, a bit of a headache, I just think, man, would I love a Tony's Donaire right now. And then my number 1 Halifax food, honey garlic fingers from Randy's on Gottingen. Get a garlic fingers with some honey glaze on the bottom. But coming out of those days, I was just moving from Halifax to Toronto at that time. Terrible idea. It's worked out okay, but I don't recommend it to anybody. But I had a background at Dalhousie. I did an English and creative writing degree. And when I moved to Toronto, I went into journalism school at Centennial College. I teach a bit with that program now. And I'm still a big believer, a big proponent in formal journalistic training. I know that it's changed. I know that a lot of people go from blogging or self-content creating right into more, I guess, mainstream. I hate that word, but jobs covering teams. And that's good. That's fine. There needs to be more paths in for young people. But I do also believe in learning the basics. So my program, thankfully, was a 1-year program here. So I initially interned with MLB.com in 2017. So I showed up when it all went to crap. Gregor Chisholm was the reporter then. A New Brunswick guy. He's okay. A St. John guy. We won't hold it against him. But after that, did my own thing for a couple of years. It was Baseball Toronto was a website I ran. And then been back with MLB since 2019. That's when Gregor would have moved to the Toronto Star. Shout out to him for getting that job, because that means he left a job open. And we love that. In journalism, we love a nice domino effect job change. We absolutely love it. So it's, but yeah, I do like to think that Donairs had something to do with it.
Awesome. I just love so much that a headache and being sweaty makes you think of like a good Donaire.
I just wanted to hop on, because up in Toronto, there's so many places that tried to do, and the warning sign is always when they call it like Halifax style Donaire or East Coast style. No, get out. No, it's that's you're trying too hard. So I missed the greasy one. I always, whenever I go home to visit my folks, Ever since I've been 20 years old, I have always stopped for donair before I go to their house. Back in
One
my
of my
town,
favorite
Acropole. Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do while I was living in Halifax to razz the locals is I'd line up in the Donair line, right, and then just say loud enough at 1 a.m. while drunk, Donair's actually originated in Edmonton, and just watch everyone be like, "What?"
That's attacking our culture. We don't have much culture, but it's mostly just booze and fried food. But it's that's the good stuff.
All right, a couple of quick ones here. So this one comes in from our Discord. OB says, if the rumors are true that teams are simply not interested in our prospects, what can we even do? And is this because of our lack of pitching prospects or our lack of pitching prospects at AAA?
Yeah, some of the pitching prospects in the system are pretty low down. The Blue Jays, like I mentioned earlier, are starting to do a better job of developing pitchers for 2022. But a lot of the Blue Jays are still transitioning out of that phase where there were a lot of, TJ Zoik types where it was, guys throwing 92, getting ground balls, not all that attractive. The Jordan Groshans deal is a bit of an example of this as well. He was ranked number 4 in our rankings. He was due to fall, and I think he was about to fall out of the top 100. Similar to the Austin Martin trade with Jose Berrios last year. A couple examples of the Blue Jays dealing a guy who had just kind of started to go a little down, that arrow starting to turn down. And you might as well get something at that point. But definitely a case of the Blue Jays needing another year to get that lower level talent back up. Because unless you're dealing someone like Gabby Moreno, which, yikes, Ricky Tiedemann, who you can dream on as a legitimate superstar. But even when you get into guys like Aurelvis Martinez, it's cool that he hits the ball hard, but he's going to strike out every other at-bat. So you're not exactly in the Vladdy and Bo era of this farm system. It's okay, but it needs a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then lastly, how enticing is the fact that the Blue Jays valued base running / stealing under Schneider with Whit Merrifield joining, as he's had 166 stolen bases since 2017, which I believe is second in the bigs. That one comes in from Peter.
Yeah, I love it. I love the aggression under Schneider. And I saw somebody tweet there. I tweeted about it, but the John Schneider is the first bearded manager in Blue Jays history. So shout out to that.
Wow.
Louis Rivera, the Blue Jays third base coach, has for many years called me Schneider. Because it's kind of like the same joke I give to my buddy Scotty Mitchell, who covers the Blue Jays for TSN. He always gets upset because I say that he looks like every bald guy. I'm quickly learning that that people, any guy that's over 5'10" and is not super skinny and has a beard, they're like, "Oh, you look like that guy." I'm like, sure. And
you and Adam are dead ringers, actually. You're both twins almost.
Keep my head up for twins, eh?
For sure. And I walked into Schneider's office one of his first days on the job for a pregame scrum. And he looked up and he said, "Keegs, has anybody ever told you that you look like the manager of the Toronto Blue Jays?" I said, "Yes." And it's kind of annoying, actually. But it matches. Number one, it works. I think it works. And you need to push the envelope because a team this good needs to be the aggressor. They can't wait around and try to counter punch the Orioles. Who cares? Go kick their door down. You're better than them. But it also matches the team's personality and the manager's personality. That's not something I can measure with a stat, but it does matter. Like if you have a team full of 23-year-olds hopped up on sugar dancing in the dugout, you're not going to be dropping bunts. You're going to want to go out there, swing for the fences, steal some bases, and play into that energy. There is something to that, and I think they really enjoy that. You see how much even the dugout reacts when Vladdy steals a bag or something like that. But I think Merrifield fits into that. And I think, guys, this offseason, that's something, and I'm kind of just thinking of this as we go, but that's something to watch in the free agent market, trade market. Now the Blue Jays actively talenting some legitimate speed. Maybe having that bench guy who maybe hits 220, who cares, but he just comes in and runs all over teams. I think that'd be pretty good.
Very cool. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Keegan.
Yeah, Keegan, thanks for joining us, man. Really appreciate it and look forward to the next time we chat. All the best.
Definitely. Anytime, fellas. Always enjoy it. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.